This is the CineSnob Podcast.
Hi there. Welcome to episode 288 of the CineSnob Podcast. I'm Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafana.
Cody, it is, I guess it's fair to say it's spring now, right? Weather-wise. I don't know. Is it really good weather down there in San Antonio?
It's pretty good right now. It was pretty cold earlier in the week, but then it got a little bit warmer the last couple days.
So that means it's South by Southwest is right around the corner, literally starting this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Friday.
Friday. I'm not doing it this year. I just have too much going on with work.
Mm-hmm.
But you are doing it. We talked a little bit about that last week. You already started watching some films.
Mm-hmm.
But what are your plans on actually coming to Austin?
Yeah, so I'll be in Austin for 5 days. You know, back when I was a younger man, I used to drive home every night and then come back in the morning to save money.
You and I did that a bunch of times.
Yes, we did. And now I am, as they say in the movies, too old for that shit. And and I've now started staying there. So I'll be staying up there for like 4 nights. And yeah, it should be a good time. I think, you know, the last couple of years have been more focused on movies, just like seeing as much as I can versus, you know, previously we would go roam around and like find activations and, you know, just kind of, it was a little bit more loose with the plans. And then like the reason part of that happened too was because I was doing more interviews back in those days. And so, you know, you would have to skip screenings in order to make an interview on time or something like that. So, interviews feel like a semi-retirement thing for me where I just like, I haven't done an interview at a festival in years at this point. Not that I didn't like it, but there's just so much that goes into it, just like communication, and then having to like be on their schedule, and then inevitably everything gets moved all the time, and you get bumped, and it just becomes an ordeal. So, so just movies this time, and maybe a little bit of comedy for the festival.
Yeah, you know, I used to do the interviews all the time too, and they're good. I guess I got spoiled because my first South by interview was a junket for 21 Jump Street.
Mm-hmm.
And then I after that, like smaller movies, it's always like, yeah, we'll do an interview. Where do you want to do it? I'm like, oh shit, I got to find a place to do it. Which became a difficult prospect to do. I can't remember the last interview I did. I want to say it was Burt Reynolds. It was either that or Pee Wee Herman. But I can't remember which one. It's been a while. I worked with my friend Alana on a couple of the red carpet ones, shooting for her. I think that was before I moved up here though. The red carpets are, fuck that. That sucks.
Yeah. The last interview I did was a Zoom interview. It was Edgar Wright for Sundance a couple years ago.
Oh yeah.
And then I think before that, the last I had done was like maybe the year where I interviewed Kumail for The Big Sick. Might have been like the last in-person interview I did. I also talked to Tatiana Maslany that year for a really small movie she did. She was with Jay Duplass, and the director of that movie. And I think those are the last in-person interviews I've done.
Yeah, it's not my favorite thing to do anymore.
No.
In a like a setting that I don't have to set up, I don't mind. But it's just a hassle. But you know, you can if you don't mind it, you can talk to especially if it's a smaller movie, you can talk to just about anyone.
Yeah,
if they're eager to get their word out. I think I told you I interviewed David Desmalchin for a movie he did called Animals. And this is before he kind of blew up as a character actor. Now I see him all the time, but he was like super eager to talk. It was a movie he had co-written.
Yeah. Those are always fun. The ones where you're getting, you know, people who will sit there for 15, 20 minutes and talk to you about like one-on-one about, you know, a project they're passionate about that needs, you know, publicity. And then you have the stuff like I've done one like roundtable interview, or it was like one set of roundtable interviews, and I will never do that again.
Oh yeah.
It's just people asking the dumbest shit possible, and you have to fight. And they're the ones who are not afraid to like jump in and interrupt and hog the questions. So you have to be aggressive with it and jump in, and then you have to fight off having stupid questions being asked. So
I did do one interview. That was like one of the most informal interviews with a big star I've ever done. Was I can't remember the movie, but it was with Bella Thorne.
mm-hmm.
And like we were just sitting at a conference table in a hotel like conference room, and I have the video of it somewhere still. Like she was super cool, and like I think we talked for like 10 minutes, and yeah, but that was the first time it was like somebody who's I don't know how big of a star she was at the time. I mean, I don't relatively, I think she's still sort of not super mainstream, but it was so casual. It was almost strange. I think that was at the Intercontinental. Is that the hotel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something different. It's called something different now, I think. But
yeah. I plan to. I'm actually working some paid photography gigs a couple of nights of South by, so I'm actually going to make some money on South by Southwest.
Very nice.
And I'm gonna. There's all kinds of stuff that I hope is downtown. My wife and I are probably going to go look around for a little while on next Sunday, just to see what's cracking, if anything.
It is a bummer, even though I think it's going to be hard to get into, but it is a bummer, I guess, for you that the one year that you don't do it, there's a Conan O'Brien comedy event in like a tiny theater. With Robert Smigel.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else the two of them have to talk about, but I would love to hear the two of them talk again. Because I listened to the podcast with Robert Smigel from a few months ago, and it's great. It's so like great inside info. And I assume it'd be just more of that stuff. But yeah, it's a bummer. I think I said last week, I always kind of forgot about the comedy stuff until it was too late.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I've done a few things. I think I mentioned I went to ASCAT, the UCB improv thing a couple years ago with Matt Besser, and then I went to a Todd Barry crowd work show, and it was like Todd Barry, Dave Hill, and Beth Stelling, I think was the lineup doing crowd work.
You and I went to that Reggie Watts show too. We went to two separate ones. Or wait, did you go to the one it was in the big like warehouse thing?
Yeah, I went to the one that was in like a restaurant. Or no, wait, hold on. We had seen I remember seeing Kurt Braunohler.
That was at the restaurant thing.
At the restaurant, and then we saw Reggie Watts outside of the restaurant after that with Thomas Middleditch.
Yeah, I think he performed on that too.
Yeah, I don't think I saw Reggie Watts perform.
There was a like a Miller Lite sponsored show. You know that weird random like warehouse that's across the street from the convention center? It was in there. I think it was a badge holders thing. And I saw him perform there. Yeah, but I remember the restaurant one. I remember like Jessica Alba wandering around too randomly, and it was Kurt Braunohler. I think Reggie Watts was there. I don't remember who else was on that lineup, but it was daytime comedy, which is always brutal stuff. Anyway, I'll be then the weekend after is the Spurs game. So are you sticking around for either one of those?
I might be going to one of those games. I'm gonna have to go home in between and come back up, but thinking about coming up and maybe doing that Sunday game, but we'll see. Because that's after the festival, right?
I think technically, no, it's a Saturday, isn't it? The 17th is a Saturday. What day is it?
I thought they were playing Friday and Sunday.
Maybe I'm wrong. I know it's St. Patrick's Day. Is St. Patrick's Day on a Sunday? These are questions that we need to answer right this second, because
I mean, they're very important. Yeah, so they're playing Sunday the 17th.
Okay, so it's a Sunday. You're right.
And Friday the 15th, yeah.
So it wraps up. I think it's wrapping up technically that day. Like there's still a few things in the morning, like the goodbye breakfast or some stuff like that.
Yeah, that might be the better day to go in the sort of dust of it all, instead of Friday, which is like the last hurrah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anything else before we move on?
No, I think we're covered.
All right, let's get started on reviews.
Here are this week's reviews.
First up is Dune Part 2.
It's okay. I'm here. It's been a while since you've had one of those nightmares. Tell me, what was it about?
It's only fragments. Nothing's clear. You've been fighting the Harkonnens for decades.
Look!
My family's been fighting them for centuries.
Your blood comes from dukes, then great houses. Here, we're equal. What we do for the benefit of all.
Well, I'd very much like to be equal to you.
Maybe I'll show you the way.
Deal with this prophet. Send to Sussex.
Fade Rother. He's psychotic.
This is not the sequel. It's really the second part of the first Dune movie, which came out in 2021. One of the simultaneous HBO Max / theater releases. Still went on to become a huge hit. So the sequel, the part 2 was greenlit. Cody, tell us about Dune Part 2 and what you thought of it.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think this one is definitely heading towards being a hit as well. And people are carrying through with it. Yeah, I did not remember too much from the first Dune movie, just because it's been a few years and seen a lot of stuff in between, and also just I think it's got a lot of dense lore in it, and so I did what every respecting film critic does, and I looked at the Wikipedia entry for the first Dune movie prior to seeing it. I read an article that was like what you need to remember about Dune before you see Dune 2. And then I asked you because you saw it before me. And so as I was reading through it, I was remembering the details of it and also, remembering the things that I liked about it. And this basically just kind of picks up where the first one left off in terms of the story. So like you said, it is a proper part 2. There's not a ton of resetting done. But I do think that there is a tiny little bit of filling in the blanks, bringing you up to speed, but in a way that doesn't feel like you're just being fed a bunch of exposition. So I thought I appreciated that. And yeah, you know what you get here is it picks up with I don't know how much we want to get into the plot really, but it picks up really with Paul, the character played by Timothée Chalamet, basically trying to convince the Freemen, who are the sort of I guess what would you call them, like indigenous people on Arrakis? I don't. This is
yeah, I mean they're like kind of your typical indigenous people that have a outsider
valuable
savior.
Resource. Yeah,
yeah, they have a valuable resource, and then there's an outside savior to come in.
Yes, and basically it picks up with Paul trying to convince them that that he is there to help and there to fight with them and not meant to try to overtake them, that he's not a spy and all that stuff. And slowly through the course of the first half of the movie, he sort of earns their trust, and by way of earning their trust, sort of tries to convince them en masse that he is the Messiah, or the Messiah-like figure that has been prophesized in their lore. And then in the meantime, the sort of opposing people, the Harkonnens, are also plotting to take over Arrakis and kind of training their own sort of what would you call it, like a person in waiting, the next,
like an heir to the throne.
Yeah, an heir to the throne. That's a good way of putting it. And then basically everything kind of goes from there. And so I haven't read the Dune books or seen the first movie, but I think that, the common thought was that, I think for a long time was that the movie was like not really filmable. Like the story wasn't really adaptable because it was so dense and weird and all this stuff. And I think, one thing that does, remain within this movie, similar to the first one, is that it's really dense in both its like actual narrative lore, as well as, its ideas, its world building, its themes. But I think that it strikes a really good balance between these things. There's a lot of small details that are just kind of like, elements of the lore there. There's elements of details of like, gadgets and practices of the people and that kind of thing that just kind of really populate the world to where I think that the world building here is really excellent, and down to like small details being really interesting. Obviously there's also like thematic elements that really are hammered home in this one, and just in terms of like the allegories that are going on, both with, obviously the presence of religious stuff and in the presence of like the sort of like oil, allegory that's going on as well. That was also present in the book where, the spice was representative of oil and that like this sort of idea that would start a war, and all that good stuff. So, I think that is rich and richly explored. I think that as dense as it is throughout, I actually never found myself bored with any of it. And I think the closest that it gets to being kind of like a bit of a slog for me was with the Austin Butler stuff, which I think maybe is probably the weakest stuff of the film. Not just in the sense that like I feel like that storyline doesn't have a ton of room to breathe, but also I think that most of the Harkonnen stuff is just not as captivating as the stuff that's going on with the Atreides stuff, as well as the stuff with the Freeman stuff. I feel like all of that is like really interesting and complex. You see a bunch of sort of like, chess pieces being moved in terms of, what they're looking to accomplish in what the greater goal of everything and what the sacrifices are to reach those greater goals. And again, I think all of that's really interesting. I think the performances across the board are really great. I think there's like no weak spots in the cast. Austin Butler is playing weird, but also he's like interestingly and weirdly basically doing a Stellan Skarsgård impression with his voice and his accent. And it's like pretty perfect in terms of sounding like it. I guess it's sort of like they did the Gal Gadot, like everyone sounds like her, her accent, where he sounds basically exactly like him. I think Zendaya is really great in it. I think Chalamet is really good in it. I think that Josh Brolin brings a new like energy when he shows up in the movie, and it's something that wasn't really in there at that point. You get the addition here of Florence Pugh, who is sort of playing the Emperor's daughter, the Christopher Walken character's daughter, and you get to see how that fits into anything. So like I really appreciated the sort of like narrative chess pieces that are moving in here, and I think it does something that these like part 1, part 2 movies sometimes don't do, which is I think it tells a complete story in the context of this movie while also moving forward the entire saga of everything. And I think that a lot of the criticisms of these movies that are in parts instead of like actual individual sequels is that they don't always have a full arc, and I think this one definitely does. So I was pretty captivated by it, and I was all in from the get-go. And even though it does slow down towards the middle, like I said, the Harkonnen stuff I think is like the weakest stuff of the movie, but all things considered, I think it's a pretty small amount of the movie, and the rest of it I was pretty thoroughly engaged by.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I was in a very bad mood when I saw this, and I expressed this to you like after I got out that I was fucking frustrated as hell with this movie. But I've since calmed down and reassessed it, and I'm gonna agree with you. I don't know what was up my ass. Maybe it was the uncomfortable theater seats.
It
Maybe
happens.
it was a bunch of other shit. But man, it was. I was thinking about it again, and it is like true epic filmmaking.
Mhm.
And it's was just reading the box office. It's the highest opening for a narrative film since Barbie,
Wow.
which is huge for something that's was considered unfilmable. I've never actually seen the David Lynch Dune either. I know it was famously kind of abandoned by David Lynch at some point, or I don't know, or taken away from him. I don't remember which one. And it's kind of a campy thing that people appreciate. But this one, I had never finished the first one, and I watched the first one last week before seeing this one. And it's so well done. The world building aspect of it, especially, that this one kind of just what am I trying to say? Expands on all of that. And I think that it really pays off. I don't know that, it's got a pretty heavy message, I think, in it that I'm not sure a lot of people will necessarily understand. And it's kind of that Walter White, Tony Soprano anti-hero sort of thing that's ultimately the story of this. Anyway, I do agree with you in the captivating part of the Atreides stuff, the Paul stuff. There's a lot of him just becoming part of this Fremen, I don't know what you'd call it, tribe that is sort of the fundamentalist version of it. Fundamentalist sect of the Fremen. That do believe he's this Messiah character, the Maudib, and Javier Bardem is the sort of leader of this, and he gets, I guess, some of the only real comic relief in the movie. That kind of making jokes and being this sort of mentor to the character. I do agree. I like Austin Butler a lot in this, and the sequence in the arena you saw a little bit in that trailer is visually striking. But that's a good 20 minutes of the movie in the middle of it that totally pulls you away from Paul's story. Mm-hmm. And I do feel like it's a little sort of plopped in there.
Yeah.
With not a big payoff, because, even though this is kind of a second half of the first film, your mind is telling you that it's a sequel. And the idea that this character is sort of dropped in there at the halfway point of the film and becomes the major villain, and then there's whatever resolution comes from that, it does feel a little sort of short, like it's got the short shrift of it. Is that the right? Am I saying that right? Shrift? I don't. Whatever.
Short end of the stick.
Whatever. Shrifted, I think, is a word. I don't know. Anyway, maybe it's not. I don't know. What am I trying to say? I got off on a tangent about this word. But yeah, I think he's really good. I think Josh Brolin shows up and really, like you said, throws some new energy into the movie, and all this other stuff that's sort of the lore. I think the most confusing lore, I think, is the whole whatever's going on with Rebecca Ferguson as the High Mother. There's a lot of stuff going on there that is clearly meant to pay off in future installments, and I guess does later. But yeah, really, really good, solid genre filmmaking on a huge, massive scale. This thing looks gorgeous. There's some just gorgeous, I don't know if it's in-camera effects or not, but like just some sort of like long zooms that look awesome. Yeah, just really well done. And again, I don't know what was up my ass, but I was reassessing it and really, really did enjoy this quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think epic is the right word for it, and I think again pulls off the epic thing that I think not a lot of movies shoot for but don't achieve. and it's epic in like a bunch of different ways. Like, I mean, it's epic in its scale, it's epic in its ideas, it's epic in this notion that like I said, it's telling a full, multi-film arc that up until this point is like making sense. It's connecting. It feels like it's moving. It doesn't feel stagnant. And then to be able to also tell, a cohesive, full arced, narrative in this context of one movie, I think, and I think it's just smartly done, where it kind of sets the stakes almost immediately of what the movie is in the first, 15, 20 minutes of it. And then, the growth that you see from that point is your arc of movie 2. Like I said, I just, the sort of Austin Butler stuff is feels a little bit condensed in the sense that like everything else feels epic and this story feels kind of short, but that's really my only complaint I have about it. I mean, I think aside from that, from a technical aspect, it looks amazing. Again, across the board, you have like solid performances. And yeah, Bardem, I think is, I forgot to mention him, but I do think he is another major highlight of the film too. He does get the comic relief, but also, I think his performance is very good.
Yeah. And, speaking to the 2-part thing again, going back to stuff like the final Harry Potter films and Hunger Games, this one the first part was made without a sequel being greenlit. And I think it's a huge difference here, because I feel like all of those movies that I talked about before, like they literally had the screenplay and just at one page they're like, all right, stop. And then this will be movie 2. And they were made at the same time. So they feel like less than whole movies together, or less than whole movies on their own. Obviously it has to be one movie together, because it feels like they just literally stopped and just like, okay, run the credits and then we'll put this one together. That this one was, the first one was shot without the second one being greenlit, and that the second one was shot separately, continuing on the story, like literally from the moment it picks up, it picks up from the moment the first one ends. I think that's a real positive to this, and it makes it feel more epic. Like you're really dropping in on this story. You're not just relying on some truncated, decision by the studio or screenwriter or director or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like this is, in terms of like the sort of narrative thing it's trying to pull off, like the closest thing to maybe something like Lord of the Rings in terms of like its ability to tell like a story that feels like it's in chapters, like in carrying it through?
Yeah, I mean, so far, yeah, because this is just the first book. These 2 movies are the first book. I know there's a bunch of other Dune books. The second one is called Dune Messiah, and I have a copy of it that I haven't read, and it's relatively short. So I don't know if this continues what happens. I mean, I think box office wise, it's obviously going to continue. So I assume maybe there'll be some I don't know. I have no idea what it speaks to, but yeah, the Lord of the Rings is a perfect example for this. Like it was literally 3 books, literally tied into chapters, or divided into chapters. And I think this is probably the first thing that's pulled that off well since then. Outside of like TV stuff. But
you mean The Hobbit didn't pull it off?
Oh, good Lord, man. I can't believe how bad those Hobbit movies are.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's your grade for Dune Part 2, Cody?
Yeah, I'm giving it a B+. I mean, I think, I think there are elements of it, like we've mentioned in the Harkonnen stuff, that I feel like keeps it from being like truly transcendently great. But, as far as like a blockbuster movie is concerned, or a big budget epic kind of thing, I don't think it gets too much better than this. So I give it a B+.
Yeah, I agree. This is one of those rare things that seems like Dune feels like one of those things that has a very narrow audience to me. Like I've known of the book for a while. I've known people that have read it. I know that it's dense. I know that it's allegorical. And to have it be kind of turned into a film that's as enjoyable as this, that retains all of that, is a major testament to Denis Villeneuve. I think I said that right this time. But yeah, B+ for me. All right, let's move on to our last movie, Spaceman.
On behalf of the Eurospace program, 189 days into your solo journey. Commander Prohatska, how are you feeling?
What I'm doing is for everyone back home, and that makes me very proud.
And your wife Lenka, of course. I'm sure she's looking forward to having you home safe and sound. He's not doing well. He misses his wife. And he shouldn't have left.
Six months in isolation, you start thinking too much.
I'm getting interference.
I did not intend to frighten you, skinny human. Do not be afraid.
I'm losing my mind.
This is an Adam Sandler film, one of the Netflix, part of his deal with Netflix, I assume. It's not a comedy, though, clearly. It's a drama. You didn't see Spaceman, though.
I did not.
I did. So are you familiar at all with, I mean, obviously you're familiar with like Moon, for example. Great sci-fi film, really understated. This is kind of in the same vein as that, but I don't ultimately. I don't know if it really accomplishes what it sets out to do, because the basic gist of this is that Adam Sandler is an astronaut sent on this mission, technically a cosmonaut sent on a mission to investigate this cloud that has shown up in the night sky 4 years ago. From Earth's point of view, he heads out to past Jupiter to investigate what this cloud is. The mission is sponsored by corporations and run by the Czech Republic, and he's solitary in this vessel, venturing out further than any other human has ever before. And that's sort of the gist behind it, his loneliness. In the process, his wife on Earth, played by Carey Mulligan, has decided to leave him, but the mission control chooses not to inform him of this, thinking that it would hurt his morale. In the process, he feels like he's going mad as he's joined on the ship by this sort of alien spider, voiced by Paul Dano. Who sort of is able to read his thoughts and interact with his memories and sort of trigger these things. So in essence, this is based on a book called Spaceman of Bohemia. It was written in 2017 by an author from Eastern Europe, from the Czech Republic. So I'm not really terribly sure why Adam Sandler was cast in this role to play... he's essentially playing a Czech man, but he's not really, he's not doing any kind of accent work. He's just he's Adam Sandler playing really sad. Carey Mulligan again plays his wife, who kind of gets cast in a sort of thankless role in this movie, in my opinion, just to be kind of the reason he's up, the reason he's sad, the reason he's lonely, and to be kind of a bitchy character to the audience. Why is she leaving her husband while he's on this mission? I think obviously the best parts of this movie come with Sandler's conversations with the Paul Dano spider, which is sort of this enigmatic, all-knowing creature that is able to again read his thoughts and kind of trigger these memories that make him realize why what he's left behind. That said, I don't really think there's much more to this movie. I feel like it's sort of oppressively sad and depressing in a way. And I don't know that it really sort of says anything new about loneliness and the human condition. This is a guy who chose to go on this mission. For some reason, it's a solo mission. The movie never really explains why. And there's a lot of kind of lore, like backstory to this movie. There's this weird sort of retro future vibe to it. Like they have like old cell phones and strange old computers in mission control. And they keep talking about the sponsors of this mission. Like he has to say slogans at some point during his broadcasts in order to satisfy these sponsors. So there's a lot of stuff that's cooking under here that doesn't ever really get brought up, and I don't think really adds much to the story. Sandler's fine. I know you've enjoyed some of his more serious work in the past. I think both you and I were fond of Uncut Gems and Hustle from last year, the year before last. This is just sort of him being mopey the entire movie. There's not really any sort of comic relief at all in the movie. Maybe from I think one funny line from Kunal Nayyar, of course best known from The Big Bang Theory. I think he gets one funny line when he goes to meet Carey Mulligan's character at one point. He has a funny delivery of a line, and I don't know, it's really sort of one note throughout the whole thing. One setting really, either between mission control or this space vessel. And I think the end sort of, there's a lot of metaphysical stuff going on here. I'm not really sure what the end is meant to tell us. It's fine. It's not great. It sort of reminds me of a little bit of Ad Astra too, where it got a nice look to it and a weird, an interesting story, but it ends up really inert and doesn't really kind of say anything about what it's trying to say from the beginning to end. It just sort of exists.
Yeah.
And it kind of was a disappointment to me. But it's on Netflix now if you want to watch it. So I'm going to give this a B-. I don't think it's unwatchable, but it is. It's just barely a B- though.
Gotcha.
It's just barely. So I wouldn't say I highly recommend it, but there are worse ways to spend your time on Netflix, and there's probably worse Adam Sandler movies on Netflix right now. I'm sure of it.
I think that's a good bet.
It's a good bet. All right, that's going to do it for this week. Next week, Cody, I think probably we're going to have to skip, right? Since you'll
I'll be in Austin,
knee deep in South by Southwest. Well, I hope we'll talk about some of those, I'm sure, when you get done. If you want to reach us, you can email us at podcast@cinesnob.net. You can find us on Twitter at CineSnob, Facebook CineSnobNet, YouTube.com/CineSnob. Follow Cody on Letterboxd.
CineSnob Cody on Letterboxd.
Is it up to date?
No. I still haven't updated from Sundance, so I'm not doing well here, but we'll see.
Well, maybe you'll kick into gear. Who knows?
Yeah.
Anything else before we go, Cody?
No, I don't think so. We'll probably be back. Let's see what's coming out when we're back, just to give a little bit of a tease. I always have the box office website up to see what's coming out. So maybe we'll return for like
I mean, look, there's a couple big movies coming out this month with Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire, Godzilla Kong. I know I've got a screening for Arthur the King.
That also comes out with Love Lies Bleeding, the A24 movie with Kristen Stewart, and
oh yes.
So that could be good.
Imaginary is this month as well.
Yeah. So we'll be back with some good stuff, maybe. I don't know. I guess I never saw the last Ghostbusters.
Oh, really?
So
you never saw Afterlife?
No, I didn't. So if we'll see if we do Frozen Empire. I might have to catch up, which I'm sort of. There's no better word than indifferent to describe my feelings towards Ghostbusters.
Look, well, the first Ghostbusters is one of my all-time favorite movies. The second one is good. It's fine. The third one, we're not talking the Kristen Wiig one, which apparently everybody is cast off into the nether world because it had women and underperformed. The Ghostbusters Afterlife is one of those nostalgia sequels that is made for people to get sad about being old. It's not really funny.
Yeah.
Like the first film. I wouldn't say I hated it until like the very end. I was actually sort of into it. I mean, it's essentially Stranger Things, and not just because Finn Wolfhard is in it. Then at the end, it gets really craven, and I didn't like it. But this new movie, we'll see. I mean, they've got all that bullshit out of the way. Maybe they'll just make another Ghostbusters movie finally. As for the Kong Godzilla stuff, I've hated every fucking one of those things since the first Godzilla. So.
And this one to me looks particularly bad. The trailers just do absolutely nothing for me.
Yeah,
and we're also coming off of the heels of like a Godzilla movie that everyone loved, and thought was like legitimately great, and so that's not doing it any favors, I don't think.
Yeah, I believe the trailer for Godzilla, whatever this new one is called, dropped, I think the day that Godzilla -1 hit theaters here. So it's like, here, have this piece of shit too. Like,
yeah,
there's a giant axe and a robot arm monkey, and man. All right. Well, on that note, I'm Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafana.
Thank you for listening to the CineSnob Podcast. To read reviews, interviews, and more, visit cinesnob.net. See you next week.